As someone who relies on Final Cut Pro to produce literally every video that hits this channel, Mr. Mobile is a MacBook user, and as of the 2019 MacBook Pro, a pretty happy one. So the Windows PCs that I've found useful over the years have typically been ultra-portables, small laptops I can use for writing and other light work on the go.
But in case you hadn't noticed, we're not doing an awful lot of going these days. In fact, the furthest I've taken my computers in 2020 has basically been from that room to this room, maybe the occasional field trip up to the roof. And in these kind of situations, when you're never going to be too far from a power outlet or a tabletop, the so-called desktop replacement laptops are actually kind of ideal. And this one is one of the most capable you can buy for a price.
If you're a longtime subscriber or a phone geek like me, you might remember that name Razer. It's the company that churned out two of the first gaming phones to hit the scene in 2017 and 18, both of which I reviewed. Since then, the company has refocused on its core computer and accessory businesses, and this is the latest high-performance laptop to come out of its Irvine offices, the Razer Blade Pro 17.
That is huge.
Technically, it's actually a refresh of a model that was already available, but since this is my first exposure to any Razer laptop as a user, it's all new to me for this first impressions video. So, what's my literal first impression? Well, like most desktop replacements, this thing is a laptop in name only.
I mean, that is not a small computer.
Not only did its aluminum body get too hot to keep on my legs after just 15 minutes of gaming, but it's just colossal. Razer's done an impressive job of managing the display bezels so the machine isn't any bigger than it has to be. But look, with a 17.3-inch widescreen, there's only so much you can do, right? In fact, it's so big, it feels heavier than its 6 pounds. But honestly, I'd have put up with even more weight if Razer had managed to fit a bigger battery in here. More on that in a second. First, you only need to glance at the specs to see that this is a proper gaming machine. And that's always a great excuse for me to break out the old Thrustmaster collection and do some fancy flying. By which I mean, try to remember how these USB adapters work and try to teach increasingly modern games how to recognize peripherals from the mid-90s. That said, it's much easier to do this on the Razer Blade Pro than my MacBook Pro because, yes, ports! Instead of hunting down a dongle to give the machine the USB and SD card connections I use every day, I just plug in, because the Blade Pro has everything I need, including an Ethernet connection, which I laughed at first, but actually would be handy if I still went to trade shows where the Wi-Fi is trash. Anyway, once I pried myself away from flying around in Combat Air Patrol 2 and my old standby TIE Fighter, I wrapped up my day one gaming by starting Chernobylite, which was suitably spooky and perfectly smooth for the few minutes I was able to play it, before the laptop started frying my kneecaps off. This was no surprise. I was not only playing the game at maximum settings to tax that Supermax Q GPU and screen recording at the same time, but I was playing while plugged into the massive 230-watt charger. Coming from the relatively petite brick for my MacBook, this thing is a true beast. But from my early testing, it seems like you'll need it. Starting with a full charge, my first battery warning came after just 2 hours of use.
Okay.
Now keep in mind, that was 2 hours of very heavy usage with graphically intense gaming and the 4K display maxed out on brightness. It doesn't get quite as bright as I would like, but still. Also, pre-production hardware running pre-release software and drivers, and I've only been using it for a day. So folks, you don't see review in the headline. That's because this is a first impressions pass from a Razer neophyte. And speaking of that, let's talk chroma.
My only exposure to Razer's custom lighting system thus far has been the wireless charger the company put out for its smartphones. Well, on a keyboard, it's just as pretty and much more useful. You can assign different colors to different keys for different applications, or just cycle through the presets and have a visual feast. Now, I will say that despite the tutorials, the Chroma software seems pretty complex, at least on my first day, but I'm eager to see if I can set a custom lighting scheme for, say, TIE Fighter, and group certain cockpit controls and game toggles by color. If anyone knows how to do this, please drop a line in the comments. For now, I'm just enjoying the show, and stumbling upon the occasional practical benefit, like the function key that lights up the function row. Oh, complete with proper media controls. In my experience, a rarity on Windows machines. I think I complained about that on the Galaxy Book S review. One downside to this keyboard? While the keys have adequate travel and feedback, I do find them a bit on the small side. And sadly, there's no numpad in sight. For a desktop replacement notebook focused on gaming with such huge tracts of land, that feels like a missed opportunity. A Razer couldn't really fit it in, given the enormous bays it allocated to the speakers here, but the trade-off isn't worth it. The sound, while loud, is also very thin. Coming from a MacBook Pro, it's just not an impressive showing, given how much space the speakers take up.
And on this episode of Into the Fold, an exclusive first look at Android 10 for the Motorola Razer, a phone that's pushed... An exclusive first look at Android 10 for the Motorola Razer, a phone that's pushing the boundaries of what you can do with a foldable without even opening it.
And while we're talking disappointments, about the best I can say about this webcam is that, well, it exists.
It's fine for video calls and, Windows Hello, but you better make sure you've got good lighting. That same good lighting will help showcase the dbrand skin you should apply to this thing. Yeah, it's a sponsor spot, but admit it, you're as much of a Swarm junkie as I am. Swarm is dbrand's name for this addictive hexagonal print that I put on everything. And while it looks pretty great on a surface, it feels like it was made for the Razer Blade Pro. Snap it up at this link. It's in the description if you're watching on YouTube. And thanks as always to dbrand for sponsoring this video. The Razer Blade Pro 17 comes with two display options. As I mentioned, I found this one a little on the dim side, but with 4K resolution, a touch layer, and 120 Hz refresh rate, a world's first combination, by the way, it's a big win on the whole. Oh yeah, that's silky smooth there. Look at that. If you're an ultra gamer and you need to crank that refresh rate to 300 Hz, man, you can pick up the other trim, and you can also choose the usual variables like graphics card, SSD, and so forth, and both SSD and RAM are user upgradable. How much will it cost you? Well, you've got options starting at about $2,000 for the older model, climbing as you add new features from this generation, and for a trim level like this one, basically maxed out, you're looking at $3,800 US. You won't have to go far to find people who think that price too high, especially considering the kind of desktop machines you can put together for less. I know because I ran into some of those very people in the comments of a message board I frequented back in 2006, before I pulled the trigger on my first desktop replacement laptop. And folks, I never regretted it. That machine brought me 4 very satisfying years. Of course, they're not great for travel, but when you're stuck at home and you need a powerful machine that doesn't anchor you to a single room, desktop replacements definitely have a place. And by and large, my first few hours with the Blade Pro 17 have suggested that it can hold its own with my other stay-at-home favorite, the Asus ZenBook Pro Duo.
Now, I say by and large because, frankly, Razer hasn't always had the best reputation for quality control. I've been next to a lot of people whose Razer laptops have died in the middle of projects or malfunctioned in some way or another, and you don't have to go far on the internet to find similar reports basically all over Reddit and other places. I asked the company about this more than once, and the company's been really quite transparent with its feedback. It gave me a ton of ways that it has improved the customer service experience, or at least tried to improve it over the past year. And rather than me recite it in voiceover, I'm just going to throw it on the screen so you can see what they said. And I'll invite you to leave your comments below if you have your own experiences, recent experiences with Razer quality control or customer service.
This first look hands-on was produced following 2 days with the Razer Blade Pro 17 2020 review sample provided by Razer. Mr. Mobile does not produce paid reviews or hands-ons, though. Razer provided no compensation in exchange for this coverage, nor was it given an early preview or copy approval rights. That means they're seeing it for the first time right alongside you. Please subscribe to the Mr. Mobile on YouTube if you'd like to see more videos like this. Until next time, thanks for watching. Stay safe at home where possible, even as we start to unpause our lives. And as always, in spirit, stay mobile, my friends.